I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to the Richmond Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Shue?
Here.
Commissioner Francis?
Here.
Commissioner Short?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Perkins?
Here.
Commissioner Miles?
Here.
Commissioner Estelle?
Here. Next on the agenda is the approval of the May 17th, 2024 meeting of the minutes. If all the committees had time enough to read in, I'd like to get a motion on that, please.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes of May 17th, 2024.
I'll
Hey,
second. Oh, is it from?
I'll second it.
Oh, okay. Thought you were good.
Commissioner Shue?
Yes.
Commissioner Francis?
Yes.
Commissioner Short?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Miles?
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is the presentation of the Kentucky Department of Transportation. Kevin, would you like to introduce that?
I would like to introduce Casey and Brent. They are members of the KYTC Engineering Group. They have graciously accepted an invitation here to be before you all and explain to you a little bit what we are thinking and present it to you guys. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Casey, and he has a presentation ready for you.
All right, thanks, Kevin, and good evening, members of the commission. I'm Casey Smith with the Transportation Cabinet. We're over at the District 7 office in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm also here with Brent Swager, who is with the Strategic Planning Branch over in Frankfurt. We both co-manage this study for the Richmond area, predominantly mostly over in the western portion of Richmond. Not only is this a transportation study, this is also an evaluation of the future land use and how it will affect the transportation needs in the long-term future in this area. And that's really what makes this study more unique. It is that the success of the outcomes of this study is not really predominantly on what the state can do for the area, but how we can actually work together in implementing some of the improvement concepts that we'll be presenting to you as a part of this study. This is a study that began actually through conversations with Representative Fraser Gordon. Every 2 years, they actually come over to our district office to talk about future projects and the needs of their respecting districts. And one of the things that we talked about was the interchange there, exit 87 there at I-75 and Barnes Mill. That was really the primary focus at that time. And so we decided that would be good to do a study for that area. But before we actually began it, when we were scoping out what the scope of this study is going to involve, we actually met with Kevin as well as Bert with Madison County Planning to see everything that's involved in it. And it looked more and more like we need to be looking at the future land use or an area study as opposed to just being solely focused there at the interchanges as well as Barnes Mill. Now, that was part of the study, but we did feel that in order to provide a long-range benefit for the area, we do need to evaluate what we are expecting to see in the coming future, in the coming years, in this part of Richmond. So the corridor study, just doing Barnes Mill, really wouldn't be sufficient, so that's part of the reason why we looked out from a broader sense. It was a SPP funded, which is a state-funded study. It was about $150,000 that was awarded for the study. And as you see on the scope, so we evaluate the existing roadway network alongside the anticipated land use developments. And of course, that's what we do with a lot of our studies. We first want to look at the existing network, the existing land use, really the existing conditions of that area. And this was the area that we looked at. As you see, it includes the interchange there, exit 87 and Barnes Mill, Goggins Lane. It follows along Barnes Mill Road all the way out to Crutcher Pike to the west, and then up to Tates Creek Road, Jacks Creek Pike to the north, and I-75 over on the extreme eastern boundary of this study. This is an approximate area of 10,000 to about 11,000 acres, and we do understand that there is a lot of potential development over in this area between meetings with with representative as well as Judge Taylor of Madison County. So we did involve local officials as part of this study. We did 3 local officials and stakeholders meetings as we talked about this area. And we showed them a lot of diagrams such as this. Now, one of the things that we look at is crash history. In the Transportation Cabinet, we are concerned about the crashes, not only the number of crashes, but also the crash severity or collision severity that we are experiencing. You'll notice that there's heavy clusters over along the interchange, 87, as well as Barnes Mill Road, predominantly in the areas where the intersections are signalized. That's one of the characteristics of those signalized intersections. We tend to see a little more collisions happen in that area. Signals are great when people follow them, obviously, and every once in a while you do get those that are not either paying attention or they're running a red light, and evidently we do tend to see a lot more serious collisions in those areas. On this map, there's 1,472 collisions that were recorded between the years 2018 and 2022. 1 fatality was in that time range, and 254 involved 1 or more injuries. The rest of them were property damage, only minor collisions. So many of the collisions, 80% of the collisions, were rear end and side swipe. Those are characteristic of signalized intersections, and a lot of them are on the Barnes Mill Road section. The other item that we look at are traffic counts. Now we do, every 3 years, the cabinet does monitor or count the number of vehicles in order to estimate an average daily traffic that's averaged throughout the year. And you'll see some of the higher numbers on these in this chart. We have 12,750 vehicles over there by Richmond Center. And then going towards EKU, we got 29,600, as well as Goggins Lane, which we're showing 7,500. But when you project that over a longer period of time, those numbers will increase. And to get to those projected numbers, one of the things that we look at is the anticipated future land use. So these were the areas that we knew of at the time, and this map is probably not even up to date because there's a lot going on in this area, obviously. But you'll see that there are a lot of commercial, residential. There's a new school that's going on in Goggins. Also the sports complex that's coming up there at Tage Creek and Goggins Lane. So a lot of potential and a lot of development happening in this area. And this is what we talked about with the local officials and also planning officials on that area. And of course, those projections come with that. And you'll see for 2045, we got our traffic projections over on Barnes Mill is 22,200, but you also see Goggins Lane has also increased significantly due a lot in part of those anticipated traffic generators along Goggins. You'll see it says 18,500. So that does comparing it to the existing traffic counts that we have today. You'll see that there are significant differences and a lot of traffic generation potential for this area. So that takes us over to what are we going to do about it? And we have developed several different improvement concepts. And as I was saying from the beginning, this is not something that we could really rely on the state to actually implement or develop all of it. It does take some coordination at the local level, whether it's county or the city. And this is what Brent is going to be introducing to you all as to what would be some of the implementation strategies. How do we get to the point where we are sustainable with our transportation network? And that's what he'll be going through at this point.
Good evening, Commissioners. And before I dive into this, of course, tonight I'm representing the Transportation Cabinet, but I do want to let you know that I understand a little bit what it's like to be up where you sit, because I serve as the chair of the Planning Commission in Frankfort and Franklin County. So I kind of have a couple different perspectives as we did this study. But Casey mentioned, yeah, we employed a consulting team. One of the firms on that consulting team you might recognize, it's a company called TSW. I think they might have been involved in your comprehensive plan. So we had a good mix of engineering and planning looking at this and considering transportation needs as well as growth and development. So we're not going to go through every single one of the recommendations, but we have both short-term and long-term recommendations that came out of the study, and some are not too expensive, and some are very expensive. Some will take a long time to happen. Some could happen relatively quickly. So the big one that really kind of got the ball rolling was the operations of the interchange. And from how we understand it and what we've saw is that, you know, currently you have some issues right now, and it's not going to get any better unless we start thinking about what to do in the future. So we examined a couple different interchange options. The one that at this point rose to the top was what we call a single point urban interchange. Just to give you an orientation of what you're looking at on the screen, the ramps that exist today are what you see in yellow. In this configuration, the yellow pieces would be eliminated, and the red would be the new ramps. So they all kind of come into a single traffic signal in the middle that by having one signal, it operates more efficiently, and it pulls away some of the traffic operations from the adjacent intersections. So next to the large shopping area to the west, as well as the development that's over on the east side. Of course, we were also very interested in the operations of Barnes Mill Road, which is a Kentucky state-maintained highway. With the existing development, but with what we learned about the future development that's going to happen, there's going to be a lot of traffic that wants to get down to the residential, the new residential areas, the school that's being built. And so what we looked at is trying to make the operations of that roadway more efficient so that we can increase the capacity and the traffic flow, but still maintain the safety. So this is a rendering of what it might look like in the future. This is, you know, Casey mentioned this could take quite a long time. This is not something that is happening right this minute. It's not going to construction, so I don't want to get anybody excited, but this is a vision of what this road could look like in the future, which would include pedestrian and bicycling accommodations in addition to the vehicular. We also studied the intersection of Goggins Lane and Barnes Mill. This is a key intersection, as you all know, and with increased traffic going to the west of Goggins Lane and along Goggins Lane, this intersection's only going to get more and more vehicles going through there. So how can we keep traffic flowing and do it in a safe manner? The alternative that you see on the screen here is the roundabout that we considered. The traffic operations is actually very good with the roundabout. It also keeps speeds moving at a reasonable manner, you know, fairly slow, so you have safer operations. Includes pedestrian facilities as well. So I'm not going to go into all the improvements on state highways, but it also includes some things on Tates Creek Road. It also includes improvements along Goggins Lane. But if you can imagine 10,000 acres in this area, that could generate a lot of traffic. If we get more and more houses out there, if at some point in the future sewer gets extended and you increase the density of what could be built, you're not going to be able to handle all the traffic on 3 roads. It's just not going to work. So what we're starting to examine is, can you build a local network of streets that can help handle and distribute some of that? So what you're seeing in blue, primarily blue and red, are potential street connections that could be built through the development process and otherwise, so that you can distribute that. I'm trying to remember. So these are the same network, but just looks a little bit differently. We worked with the planning staff to identify where some good potential connections to the existing roads would be. And what we wanted to ultimately end up with is a good north-south route, as well as some good east-west connections between that route and Goggins Lane. You'll also see in that smaller picture that is that's a connection from the northern part of Goggins Lane over to Victory, which ties you into US 25. So then that would, once again, help distribute the traffic a little bit better. So it's important to do this, to have that more choices for connectivity, to have that redundancy, and with that can improve the mobility for your area long-term. It also helps to support people to be able to walk and bike places because it shortens the distances. And so it distributes your traffic. Another key piece is that as as a planning commission, you're talking about your public facilities, right? You're talking about how do you provide the services that you need for your citizens. And part of that is your garbage collection, your school transportation, your package delivery. And so the more choices you have, the more efficient all of those services can be long-term. We also went through a visioning exercise with our team to what could those roads look like? What should they look like as you build them? So you can see that this is a 2-lane road with a center turning lane. The center turning lane, of course, removes turning vehicles out of the traffic so that it becomes safer. But this also includes pedestrian crossings, sidewalks, bicycle and pedestrian shared use paths. You also notice that in here is how they laid out that you can have housing it's not just with everybody's backyard to a highway, but you have the housing or the different land uses that interact with that street. And so it provides a little bit different feel than what we often do when we build new roads. All right, so let me jump into the implementation. How do we move from here to there? I don't know if, Casey, you want to touch on this first part?
So, obviously, we would, it would be great if the state could take care of everything, and unfortunately, that's just really not the reality of things. However, there are projects that are really more geared toward regional connectivity, and that would make more sense to be put into a highway plan. You'll see the Kentucky 876 interchange roundabout intersection at Tage Creek Road. Those are some projects that would be work with a highway plan. The highway plan, of course, is budgeted for every 2 years, and it has a mixture of federal funds, state funds, economic development type of programming funds. But the one thing that I did want to point out, and of course, we are working toward that 2024 highway plan. In fact, I have House Bill 266, which was signed by the governor last May. And out of all of those improvement concepts that you saw on that screen, only one of them actually had federal funding, and that was that interchange there at exit 87. That has national highway dollars on it. We generally like to say that with the federal program, chances are those are projects that would be able to move forward because with the federal program, we do have to demonstrate fiscal constraint with the funds that are allocated to our area. Now, with the state program, that's not always the case. In fact, Barnes Mill Road at Kentucky 876, as well as a connection of Victory Way from Goggins Lane up to the Victory Church, those were both state funded. So the monies that are in those programs are not necessarily would be available for administering those projects. And so that's where the federal funds are really, really important. Now, the interchange is going to be a pretty long-term project. And a typical interchange would cost somewhere around $25–35 million for the design, right-of-way, utility relocations if necessary, as well as the construction. Of course, construction inflation continues to rise, so my estimates are probably going to be a little low by the time we get to the point of construction and interchange. But we have done that before, and we do have an option of doing a short-term solution, such as putting an additional right turn lane on the southbound exit. But what was put on the plan was for a complete interchange modification, similar to what you saw on the screen with the single-point urban diamond interchange. Now, the time frame for something like that could be 5 years. Those are long-term solutions. So there would be some time before we get to that part. And in fact, the only portion of that project that has been budgeted within this highway plan is just the design. The design is a little over $2 million to do a project of that scale. Of course, that also involves a lot of federal FHWA input as part of it, as being part of the interstate system. Now, there are some other improvement concepts that could be handled through a local level. For example, we did have shared use paths along Goggins Lane as well as Tates Creek Road, to go from one side of the interstate to the other along Tates Creek, and that could be funded through TAP or Transportation Alternatives Program dollars. That's a discretionary, competitive type of program, as well as several other grants from the bipartisan infrastructure law that had several grants in there as far as reconnecting communities and so forth. So there are possibilities that can be taken at a local level, or better managed through a local level, and as opposed to trying to get it into a highway plan, just due to the budgetary constraints that we have in the plan. And so we'll let Brent handle the rest of them here in the strategy.
Let me jump back here just for 1 second. I'm going to put a little bit of more of a sunnier spin on that first bullet. And as you all know, you all are planning the future for your city, and all good planning has to come with starting with ideas. And so we went through this over probably about a 15 to 18 month process of doing this planning study. And the 3 projects that were mentioned, although one of them has firm funding to start the design, and the other 2 are mentioned but aren't necessarily going forward. There's 3 projects that came out of our study that now are recognized in the highway plan, and the ball is starting to roll a little bit, okay? And so if that doesn't happen, then who knows when you would start any of this. So I think even though it might take a while, you got to start somewhere. So let's talk more about, get away from state funding and necessarily just the state road system, and talk about maybe some of the things that you could be thinking about or working on in your planning commission, and then as well as the county's planning commission. The first thing, as you know, you have a transportation element within your comprehensive plan. And I know that was put together not that long ago. However, now we have some additional recommendations that have come out of our study. And so what we would recommend is taking this and updating your maps that are within your comprehensive plan. Of course, you can do what you like. You can take the whole thing that we've worked on. You can take bits and pieces. That's your prerogative. But you could update the transportation maps. And then you could also adopt this study as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. So then you have it as reference. You have it as something that can be used in your decision making and on different cases that you hear. We showed you this graphic that you see on the right side about the new collector roads, that could be adopted. And this may be a little bit more pertinent for the county, but I think since I know that we have, in Franklin County, we have a joint city and county planning commission, we try to get everybody on the same page with the same regulations as much as possible. This may be something that you can work on and try to have a standard that works both for your city as well as for the county. But to come up with a typical section that can be then used for within development plans that matches this, or it could be a variation of this. Right-of-way preservation, so the land that's needed for our transportation, whether it's the trails or the roadways, it's going to be easier to build them in the future, to design and build them, if there's nothing built on them already. Okay, so to widen Barnes Mill Road, if you plat out property where the backyards are right up against the current existing highway right-of-way, well, it kind of pins us in and either makes it very expensive to buy people's yards or their houses in the future, or it makes it where we just can't do it because it won't be politically feasible. So in your working with cases, if you can take this into consideration, both for widening and also those new routes that we identified, there may be instances where you can leave that space open and not have anything built there so that things can be, the roadways or the trails can be built in the future. Now, there also, I think, will be opportunities that when you have developers move forward with what they, proposals, that they can actually build pieces. So if you can imagine those long red routes going through different farms right now, or what are currently farms, but then as development subdivision proposals come forward, that one little segment that goes through that farm, they could incorporate that into their design and build that section. So then the more we do of that, the less that comes out has to be sought after in public dollars. And then I wrote down the last bullet here, and I really need to change the terminology to something that's would be more like an exaction fee program. But the idea here is that you can, when you have development that's proposed and building permits issued, is that you charge them a fee, and then that money goes into basically a big pot that can then be used for improvements, infrastructure improvements. You can do it for roadways, but there's areas that use it for sewers or parks or schools. So rather than, you get a development, you decide whether you think there's a traffic impact, maybe you make them put in a right turn lane on the road or something like that. But that's in the long term going to be very small compared to when you start adding up all the developments together they're going to have a huge impact. So if you can get them to each pay their fair share, then you can do larger improvements collectively. Our consultants also put together this little tool. It's a we call it the cheat sheet. It's a front and back that walks you through, and I think each of you might have a copy of this. What the considerations if you have proposals that are in the areas where it's yellow, those yellow lines, or the new routes, or the blue lines where we have existing roads. It walks you through the process of what things to consider and things to do during a rezoning or a development plan review. And this is just some screenshots of that. I'm not going to go through because I think we're short on time. But I mentioned impact fees or exaction fees, and I think I pretty much explained this already. So it's really a way to raise local funding to do the things that you need to do locally, as opposed to trying to squeeze it out of the existing city's budget or trying to beg your legislator to try to come up with state monies. So that's what we have. There's a whole collection of different recommendations that come out of the study. We hope that you all will consider this, obviously not tonight, but in future deliberations, think about what could be done to move some of this forward, things that are under your control, working with Kevin and as well as with the county. And I will open it up to see if you have any questions.
We got any questions?
On the Barnes Mill project, maybe I missed this, you have money for that, right?
No, there's not money for the Barnes Mill at this point, right? Was that the state?
That's state funded, yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
so-
it's state funded.
So if you can imagine, we have the state has a list of projects that's a mile long, and we have funding for a few feet. And so it has to be decided which projects can move forward. And I don't think, at this point, because it's competing with lots of other projects, I can't say whether it will move forward or not.
I understand that, but a lot of people, when we discuss projects, they want to know what we're going to do about traffic. And obviously, we don't do anything about traffic. That's the state and, and if you don't have the money, I mean, what's it look like financially? Does it look like they're going to be able to fund us in the next year, 2 years?
Yeah, so it's listed for fiscal year 2025. The design of it is probably going to be about $1 million. What we're looking at is going to be some access management through that area, and it also includes the roundabout over at Goggins Lane, actually. Yeah. However, yeah, as Brent was saying, there's I can't really say that there's much guarantee or promise, of delivering that project, but it is in the plan, actually.
Yeah,
So
that's
if
our
we
problem, yeah. We were having to deal with what we have now, not what we can promise in the future. And so that does make it pretty tight on us. I mean, it really does. And of course, you get places like on Barnes Mill, I mean, as you were saying, we're already backed up against all this other property. How are you going to widen it without taking away from somebody else that there's nothing there to take away from? So, unfortunately, we're dealing with what's already there. But it's going to make it rough. It makes it rough on us for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. And so I showed you that diagram of Barnes Mill,
Yeah.
and so by doing that, we were able to come up with a ballpark number of how wide you really need to be to accommodate all of that. And so that can be used as a tool, if there are any projects that you're dealing with. But, so fiscal year 2025, so that's coming up, but they are state funds, and so there's just no guarantee that that project will move. It could, but there's no guarantee on it. And once again, that's just for the design of it. But like the interchange design, I don't know how much you all have experience with this, but design of highway projects takes a long time. It's not something that gets done in a few months. Typically, this scale project will take 1.5 to 2 years just to design it.
Okay, Rob?
Mr. Chairman, board members, if I may, there is money appropriated at the state level that was done back in 21, 22, when they proposed a new middle school. That is for a left turn lane coming to town on Barnes Mill Road, a left turn lane on Goggins. So that's one project for that corridor you will see happen probably in the next 2 years. There's a little dispute right now between the school board, if they can even do that project, and the city may enter into a memo agreement with the school board to do the project, and facilitate it, and be reimbursed. So I know that's one piece of that corridor that's a big concern, was a left-hand turn on the Goggins coming into town off of Barnes Mill. But that is a project that you'll see happen in the next 2 years, I think. It's not as big as what these guys are talking about, even some.
Again, that exit 87, where is the plan at for that? The interchange out there on?
The plan for that? Well, so once again, what we did was a planning study, so this is a very high-level look at things, getting into the details, starting to design it. Is that coming up this year, this next fiscal year?
That'll be the next fiscal year.
Okay, so it likely will start July 1st of next year.
Did you all get any local input on, you did?
Oh, yeah, that's always a very important part of our planning studies, especially ones that are like this. So we definitely contacted, worked with all the elected officials. We had emergency responders, such as the sheriff and fire departments. I can't remember if we had sewer department in there and public works.
And you all have no plan to open up Tate's Creek and I-75 to put in a new interchange there?
No.
Because, gosh, that traffic's going through.
Proximity is going to nick us on that one, actually. So there's, we already have that interchange, exit 91 in place. Interchanges per FHWA requirements do have to be spaced out. I believe it's 3 miles apart. If you're out in the rural areas, when you get into an urban area, it could be as little as 1. But, you know, those are going to be restrictions that we'll be finding when we're trying to justify an interchange. Design, it takes more than just a design of an interchange to put one onto the interstate system, because we have to have a justification on that. How is it going to divert traffic? Why aren't the other interchanges adequate? You know, or can we do improvements to the existing interchanges? They'll ask those questions first before they start saying, okay, you could put on a new interchange. But currently, right now, no, we do not have a project identified to put in an interchange at Tate's Creek.
When the money's appropriated, who decides on it? Is that state?
For the state
legislature?
funds? Yeah, so well, it's a combination. A lot of our leadership over at Frankfurt, as well as communication with the General Assembly. So Representative Fraser Gordon could ask if we could go ahead and move ahead on a project. But like I said, we've been saying we do have to balance it amongst all the other projects throughout the state. So, but yeah, that is a decision that happens more in a higher level than we are right now. Yeah.
So we just need more crashes?
Well, yeah, then sometimes that's the unfortunate saying, you know. It's we do have a highway safety improvement program. However, it's more of a reactive program, not one that is that we try to find deficiencies before crashes happen.
How high on the list is our projects? Are we down here?
Unfortunately,
Are we up
unfortunately, I really don't know how to answer that
here?
question.
So you
That's
don't have
something.
a list?
We have a list that is House Bill 266. However, the prioritization of that is something that changes throughout the time period of that plan. You know, I really can't say to you, you know, how high these projects are on an SPP priority list. It's just something that's really hard to target, I think.
These recommendations where we need to keep this cleared for future road work, you know, the yellow on the thing, how do we control, I mean, we need a big plan. Somebody needs to keep track of that when a piece of property goes up for sale.
I mean, that's probably, yeah.
If I may, our comprehensive plan is about due to be revamped. And I'm going to work with Bert over at the county. I want to see our comprehensive plan joined, not just dead-end streets at our boundaries of the city. That does not work for me. So my relationship with Bert now is communication, communication, communication. He already expects a lot of this area to be, at some point, whether it's in my time, your time, somebody else's time, to be annexed into the city at some point in the future. So our comprehensive plan, if I have my way, is going to incorporate a much, much larger picture for the city moving forward, whether I'm alive at that time or not, to work together with the county. So it would be, like they're saying, we would either adapt, or make whatever appropriate changes we feel needed, along with street profiles, what have you, to basically become a placeholder for future development, whether it's in the county and someday in the city. At that point, that placeholder holds it. And then therefore you can ensure that the path of these streets go in as development
So you'll
occurs.
alert us if there's conflict.
Any more questions?
I guess I have a little problem with, this project cost $155,000 to do, right? This study.
Approximately.
Yeah, approximately. I would think that when you, and this is not the only project that you're doing, I'm sure, you know, you've got other things around the state. I find it, you know, hard to believe that, and I'm not blaming you because you don't set this up, But if you do these projects, that you don't prioritize which ones are the most important. And then have some idea when you're going to have the money to do it, because that's what the citizens want to know when they come here. They want to have some idea, because they pay taxes, when they're going to get better transportation. And to me, I would think that if I pay money out for a study, then somebody should sit back and say, okay, Richmond or Winchester or Covington, Kentucky or whatever, that project should be number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 like that. But you tell me there's no prioritization.
Well, there's kind of two different pieces to the puzzle here. So we did this planning study, which is local for your area, okay? And when we went through and came up with a list of projects that we, through input as well as the engineering analysis, we felt like this is a good set of projects. We also came up with a general high ranking, medium ranking, and low rankings. So this is for your area. This is it, and specifically the West Richmond part of your area. So we do have prioritization at that level. Now, what was talked about before is how do you prioritize the projects in the state highway plan where you have, I think it's thousands of projects listed, and you don't have the money to do it. That's something that, in terms of what moves forward, is a decision by people that are much higher up on the food chain than Casey and I, as well as working with legislators. So
How did we get it moved up? Did we contact our legislator?
That's right. That's what I was getting ready to say. That's
Yeah.
where the monkey's on their back, because they're the ones that we voted to go in and to work with us, so we've got to reach out to them. And it's not you all's job to move it up, but we've got representatives, state representatives, and different ones here, that if we can reach out to them and push them, then maybe we can get it done.
That's what I was saying.
So I think that's.
But I think
that's the
that
whole
is
thing
why,
to it like that.
you did see 3 of the projects that came out of our study, hit the highway plan. And so there's we'll just say there's some movement in the right direction. But you also have to remember that there's, dozens and dozens of other cities that are trying to do the same thing, unfortunately.
You kind of narrowed it down, and basically you're just saying I prioritize, the Barnes Mill area of anything within Richmond. That's the one we probably need to be looking at most. Okay, so that's where we need to now step in and say, all right, we need to go, like you say, kind of try to push, hopefully, to get that area taken care of first.
So, and once again, these are for the projects that would be funded at, through state or federal highway funds. And what we're trying to do is also give you some tools to move forward and not just wait for everything to have to come through that program.
Gotcha.
For those projects to show up on the highway plan, I mean, that is a really good step toward building these projects, obviously, because if it didn't even make the highway plan, then finding the funds would really be a struggle. So, no, it is a step in the right direction. And I apologize, it sounded like that was kind of a downer when I was saying we only had one that was fairly funded, but actually making it into the highway plan is definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Okay, one more question, sir.
Is it realistically to expect these subdivision developers to put in sidewalks like we saw in these beautiful pictures here? We don't have that currently.
This, left up to us on that.
Well, I can't answer that specifically for your local area. However, I've seen this same kind of debate happen elsewhere, like where I live. We used to not have sidewalks that were required in subdivisions, and they are required now. And it's a cost of doing business, and it's a cost of providing the public services that are needed and to improve the livability. It's basically passed on to the home buyer, and in the long term, it's really not much of an addition in terms of cost. But that's just a decision that has to be made through the Planning Commission.
Do you currently do that?
Yeah, there are rules and regulations for the sidewalks and subdivision, yes.
Currently, that exist for developers that are developing?
Developers, yes, sir. Any more questions?
Thank you all very much for having
Thank you.
us.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Next on the agenda.
Mr.
You want-
Chairman?
Okay, Tyler.
Did speak, did speak to the principals and the representatives on item 5 and 6, and we would request to flip those and do 6 first.
Let's move 6 up.
Yes.
Okay. Next on the agenda is number 6, is the preliminary plot approval for subdivision at 204 Concord Road.
Mr. Chairman and all the commissioners, I certainly appreciate you all taking me out. I have been tasked with the obligation to coach the 7-year-old All-Stars who are going to be wearing the city of Richmond on their chest, and those little knuckleheads are getting ready to practice. So I appreciate the opportunity to come first. If you all recall, so the address is a Concord Lane address, or Concord Road address. However, this is a Benson Road entrance. You see before you, and what you should have in your packet is our preliminary. Mr. Kazi has done a wonderful job of working with all of our engineers. And to be quite honest with you, most of the questions or most of the commentary is going to come from our engineer and from Mr. Kazi, and to answer any questions you have. So with your all's permission, I'll step aside and call our engineer. Rory will come up and explain everything as we go in the event that you all have any questions. And Mr. Kazi, I think you all have put a lot of effort into this at this point, so if you don't mind to lead the show and identify anything that you have concerns with.
Well, I don't want to steal any of Rory's thunder here, but of course, this is our Concord project that, under much deliberation, received its zoning. It is R3, R2, and R1. What you are seeing is, if I can get this thing to work here, R3 section separated by the R3 boundary there. You move to the R2, which is this entire island, which is now separated by a zone boundary, moving into an R1 with single-family houses. I will make note that there is no connection to Concord over here. This is all floodplain. It will not be disturbed. Nothing can go in there as far as structures, what have you. So with that being said, if the commissioners have any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer those.
What about that Judah Bear?
Judah Bear is located right here. It comes down the hill and around, and will tie into Hidden Hills and exit out, I believe, at our new traffic light. I think that's the correct one. So the connection or the access to Judah Bear occurs right here, and that currently is off-site. Tyler, do you have that I sent you?
If I may, so what we presented is the property that we own. I'm not allowed to tell you what we're going to do with somebody else's property. Now, if the city wishes to direct us as we move forward, but this is our plan on our property, that this is the preliminary plat for our property that we can and we have the ability to build on. Now, if anything else needs to happen beyond this, I think we understand and expect, but for the preliminary plat process, we can only show you what we intend to do with what we have control of.
So right now, that's not in the plans to be a connected road to the,
It's
well,
not
I'm just
our- it's
asking,
ours.
it's not,
We
well, that's
don't
what I'm
own
saying.
it. However, if we go back in time a little bit, when Benson Drive, which would be, if you don't mind, who has the laser?
I got it.
Guys, if you go to where Benson Drive is on the bottom, the southern portion, yeah. So when that portion of it was developed, we drew lines and then we matched those lines moving up, R1, R2, R3, right? Well, when that was developed, the easement was granted. And that's a separate parcel than what we have before you right now. My client does not own it. We can't control it. I can't tell you that we don't have the ability to do anything on it. However, I think through the planning process, we expect some things to happen. However, preliminary plat-wise, I cannot show you something on somebody else's land in which my client doesn't own.
So as we speak now, that's our only point of ingress and egress, correct?
No, not at all. No, if you go down, Kevin, if you'd be awesome on that laser.
I got you.
Yeah, you hit me with the laser on Benson Drive again. We come in there as well. So, if you can imagine driving down Urban Road, on your left-hand side, you know where their storage units are?
Correct.
The old redhead mark?
Yes.
Right? Benson Drive goes right up the side of it. As soon as you go through, and it's a very short staggered, maybe 2 or 3 tops, and then you hit the stub out, which was planned.
Correct.
And then that's where you see this. So
Okay.
it's absolutely, we have ingress, egress, but this process is the preliminary plat, right? So I can only talk to you guys about what we own, what we have. However, we expect, as we work with the city, there'll be other discussions, but I can't give you a preliminary plat for something that my client doesn't own right now.
Well, I was just asking a question about this, that's all I was asking.
And that's very fair, but we expect to talk to you guys about it.
When you go through the Benson Drive, you go right through the PUD, don't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the PUD, the reason it was developed was to have a low-density, kind of a private section there, and it's a pretty nice little area. Now we're going to attach it to a much denser property and run traffic through the PUD. So I kind of wonder what's our reasoning there. I mean, why do the PUD? Why have those people spend all that money and do that? And some of those homes are pretty nice, and the apartments are pretty nice.
Well, to answer that question the best I can, that PUD was developed probably not thinking about the urban sprawl when it was developed. However, Benson Drive, actually, there's a cul-de-sac here, but don't let that fool you. This property is actually stubbed out to the next piece of property. It was in its original design. So to say that they were not expecting it would not be correct. Benson Drive has a little 50-foot wide connection to the property adjoining it, which is the client's property now, for the extension of Benson Drive during the creation of that PUD. So it was part of that design.
Yeah, but I don't think these were more a dense area. Maybe they thought about an extension of the PUD or something like that. I don't think they thought that a much denser project would be right behind them.
I think wasn't that PUD, we developed it and then the guy, it fell through on what he wanted to do with it. It was designed as a PUD and then it fell through.
Without getting into an extremely long conversation, I can assure you that there were several instances of saving it. And a lot of things got changed from the original plan. It was rearranged in a manner that would not reflect its original plan. So as it meandered through its origin of day one to where it is today, it is a different animal. However, they did meet their densities. They didn't increase anything within their general scope. It just was, everything was relocated and changed. I would say, back to this project, this development is far less dense than it could be. I would say that for their benefit. This thing could be packed quite a bit more, Dr. Miller, just so we know.
Are these condos like Ash Park?
All I see is squares.
I know. But before we get to that, you know, that's
Well, I couldn't attest, maybe you guys could enlighten us, but,
I mean, I'm happy to call my developer to explain to this. However, my point is, as Mr. Cosby explained, the density we have eliminated. We are far less. The city's already approved the zones. we've matched the zones to the prior development, which is right before it, which comes to the corner on Urban Road and on Concord. This is simply I think the issue that's presented respectfully is whether or not this works within the plan. And there's nothing here, and Mr. Stewart is more than capable of testifying, and he'll be glad to, but we matched up on the entire right side. All those are single matches single, multi again. And I would love to ask the question, and for a responsive scenario, and I think Mr. Stewart will be best to testify to it, or Rory will, as to the scenario of here, it all matches, and if you all have concerns as to the way it lays out, the density of the layout, and the location. And I think that's what I ask you all to focus on. Are those, where it is, the density, location, it's already been approved. We're not sneaking anything in. It's been approved for that type of build. So if the focus is density or location or layout, then that's why I've got this gentleman here to answer those questions. So what, do we have concerns in regards to density or layout or location?
No.
No.
Kevin, is there anything else you need to say on this?
I would like to add, Rory, since we last spoke, we have had a zone change request, and I know you and I worked diligently at the last moment to get this thing prepared for the commission members. But in light of traffic and looking out for the future of the city, I would like to recommend from this point, if we had a stub street right there, this will in turn most likely benefit the adjoining tract that is seeking zone change. And if that were to happen, it could provide extra access and egress options, with this not being at this time a part of our equation. We have no design for the zone change that will be coming to you after this presentation. That's merely a zone change. But if anything comes from that, a design will come. If this is provided, then we will have interconnectivity in an area that has slim to none. And this is an important part of the city. We're talking about urban sprawl out toward Barnes Mill and all this kind of stuff. This is about to happen here if we're not careful. So interconnectivity and getting our stub streets, just like the Benson Drive did back in time, provided the stub out to this piece of property. This piece of property needs to provide the stub out as it's doing now. But we really need one going to the west here for future
Where would that
improvement.
jump out to? That's the question.
That's going to come out right behind that field behind Mann Chrysler.
Okay. Well, okay.
To the left of Spurling?
Correct.
Yeah,
It-
there's the open field
I
back there.
foresee
My
this
client just
street
gave me the okay.
kind of encompassing the trailer park and then back down.
Yeah.
Because we need, I mean,
But
that's the
that's
kicker.
speculative right
You know,
now.
that's
We
the
haven't
big
seen the
question
design.
about the Judah Bear. We really just, we need the more ingress, egress
Yeah.
that we can get. But yeah, we don't want to dump it out and right into a spot where, like on Urban Road, we know how backed up it gets, especially around in Man Chrysler, all that area that, it can back up forever and ever and ever.
At a minimum, this connection at a minimum, here today, I can foresee some relief, because and we all know if you were trying to get out there behind Man Chrysler onto 52 and turn right or left, again, we're off site, and I don't want to take up much time. This would allow the people over here, if this were to develop, to come through and down Benson, or even across, I believe, Spencer and down, and provide 3 accesses. But
When
again,
Jet Lane goes through, shouldn't that complex be turned so that you have a straight?
as we move forward, Rory, you may, and don't want to steal any thunder again, but if we're able to do that, yes, Mr. Colley would have to manipulate those structures to suit his client, to make room for that road. Yes.
I guess I don't have any trouble with what they're presenting a whole lot. I don't, but what bothers me a little bit is this is right next to Ash Park. Now, we're not going to allow condominiums to be called condominiums because they've got a 2x4 between them and they've got concrete, which I don't understand why it would be between them. But we're not going to allow that kind of thing, right?
From what I can tell here, I don't have
no back
Daniel here
door.
for building plans, and of course, this is a concept. The only thing we're approving here right now is just a preliminary, so.
I understand, but in the future, if this is, we're not going to build another thing like that, right?
Only if you don't approve it.
Okay.
So I would agree.
We never see the designs of the buildings.
No, we won't.
I mean, does architectural design department, do they have any, our hands are really tied up here as to what we can and can't do.
All this would come back to Kevin and them, and I think we discussed that sometime, and whatever the plans that they would come back to, that if it was okay, and they know exactly what it would look like. And they have to show it to them on that anyway.
Your hands are limited to some degree.
That's correct, Dr. Miller.
Mr. Stout, I believe that's correct, and we're certainly willing to do that. And I think in the past, there's been a scenario in which if we're going to talk about stubbing it out that way, we're going to move, I'm not going to move. The engineer's going to engineer things. Math is the reason I didn't go to medical school, I didn't go to law school, but they got that on their belt. And what I've suggested in the past and what I've accomplished is subject to approval of the city of Richmond and the staff therein.
Mhm.
If we need to move it, if he needs to do his job and move it this way, then draw stuff out, okay. And if they want to prove it, then I get a chance to come back to you and say, well, he's wrong. I should get it my way, right? But if he approves it based on this general idea, well, then I don't have to come back. But then that's just the preliminary plat part. We're not talking about building things yet. Just this is what it's supposed to look like on a map. That's it. It's the only question. That's it. Not building anything. They still have to approve every single thing. It's just gonna look kind of like that. And if we need to move a building this way or that way, subject to the city approving it and agreeing with it, and that's what I ask, that there be a motion made subject to city approval, and based on this, subject to city approval, that's what I'm asking. And, he's the engineer, he drew it all, he got it all. So if you all have real questions that takes an educated answer, he's the guy to have it.
These blocks behind the condominiums here, are they garages or?
Yeah, I'm Rory Cayley with EA Partners. For the record, I'm a landscape architect. I work with the engineers. Mostly I do this planning. So the apartments and the townhouses that we have here is something Mr. Stewart has built in other communities. And what you do is you end up having a garage and then you have a personal little courtyard as you go into your townhome unit. We've used that in other places that lets us address the grade on the ground. You can have the garage at the bottom level or second level, depending on which way they're pitched. We've got a lot of contours out here. We're looking for your approval so we can get into the real design of it. And that is how you put the buildings on the land where the roads go. And we will be looking at doing the extra stub to the west. As they get approved and as their plans come along, the two sides will have to work together and make sure the roads align.
Any more questions? Anything else, Kevin?
I would just like the commission to know, we're not this isn't a site development plan. All these pretty townhomes and details and things up there, quite honestly, at the end of the day, don't even need to be on this. The only thing that we're after is a street right-of-way and interconnectivity. What you see here will ultimately turn out to be an independent development plan, because these are going to set on individual tracks. So I'll get a development plan of this, I'll get one of that, I'll probably get a phase of these. All of these will be separate. So tonight, we're only after what we feel good about interconnectivity and streets and its layout and where we're going. As far as the details and things, those will show up later in a development plan and be spelled out explicitly for us.
This is basically just reiterating what they brought before us before. I mean, the way the zone was going to be laid out, or the way they wanted to do the R1s, R2s, and R3s. So this is, instead of being one big open field, now you broke it down into what they're individually going to be. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer. It's just, didn't realize the possibility of maybe having a little zone change and putting that little stub out to the left. That might be something that might pop up and change things a little bit, but I think it's just beating the horse on this one.
As a closing remark, if this board deems it, you could consider a motion passing it based on staff approval. And I would make example that you make the motion that this stub out is there. And with staff approval, I can work with Mr. Colley and clean up anything else that needs to be there, crossing Ts and dotting Is for a preliminary plat. After that comes construction drawings, and we won't even talk about those pull your hair out. But if that is the consensus of this commission, you could certainly do that, and I would be comfortable with that.
I would encourage that. What happens after this, it's what this looks like, and he's got to move it this many feet, and then he's got to add a shrub. You don't need to come, I don't need to bother your docket with a shrub. The city of Richmond has wonderful staff people. I would ask that you pass it pursuant to his recommendation, allow us to work with them and get a development done.
Okay. Ask for a motion to be made on this new subdivision at 204 Concord.
I'll make a motion, we accept the preliminary plat approval for the new subdivision at 204 Concord Road.
Dr. Short, did you,
Do-
contingent upon everything that Kevin was saying?
Contingent upon, I don't know how to word that as far as that stubbing out is going to be concerned.
Everything discussed?
Pardon?
Just everything discussed, correct?
Yeah.
The contingencies and, okay.
Yes.
I second.
Okay, Commissioner Shue?
Yes.
Commissioner Francis?
Yes.
Commissioner Short?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Miles?
Yes.
Commissioner Stell?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all, if I may be excused.
Good luck. Good luck.
Hey, we're playing Lexington.
Oh.
Which is where Mr. Worley's from, so let's let him get that.
Next on the agenda is a zone map request for Allison Gale Applegate, property located on Irvin Road, existing zone B3, and MP requested zone R2 and R3. Mr. Worley.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Gotcha.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. How are you?
Thank you, Preston Worley, on behalf of the applicant, Ms. Applegate, through her potential purchaser and developer, Richmond Development Company. I've got Mr. Alan Grant here with me. For the record, I've got a copy of the notice that was put in the Richmond Register. And then I think Mr. Stone already has proof of the sign that the city directed to be put up there, so I think we are good to go there. So this is a requested zone change for, the PVA has it listed as 77.24 plus or minus acres. As we have it surveyed, it's really about 68, just a little over 68 acres. So there's an out parcel or something along the way that the PVA hadn't picked up on, but the survey and the zoning maps that have been put in the record for you show that exact 68 acres. The property fronts on Irvin Road. Currently, the front portion of the property is zoned B3 and tucks in behind the Mann Chrysler dealership and is in between the dealership and the mobile home park, the Sperlin mobile home park there. Then the good majority of the rest of the portion of the property is also zoned currently for mobile home park. And that runs up all the way along to a stub of Atwood Drive that comes into the property and then goes along the bottom half of Hidden Hills subdivision. So what we are requesting is that bottom half that bottom about third that fronts onto Irvin Road be zoned R3 for a multifamily project, and then the upper 2/3 be zoned R2 for a less dense two-family or townhome project. At this stage, there is what that is exactly going to look like. We can't tell you. There's a lot of engineering that has to go on here, and I put an exhibit in your packet there. If you'll look, there is a contouring lines exhibit in the back that will show you that section of the property that we're asking to be zoned R2. You've got a almost 40 to 50 foot topographical decline that turns into a 20 to 30 equally steep incline on the other side, along with the creek, and I think there's also a large power line there. So while we think that this is an appropriate zone, I just say all that to you to say there's a lot of engineering that's going to have to come back to you to show you exactly what can be built there. But I will say that a great natural benefit to that is that whatever is built on that section will have a natural distance, and that ravine and that green space will create a natural buffer between the existing Hidden Hills neighborhood. So while I think that the R1, R1B, R1C neighborhood of Hidden Hills, an appropriate step down to R2 is a good transition, that R2 step down will be after that large ravine in whatever we bring back to you. So again, we can't tell you exactly what that'll look like without the engineering. But that's why I think that the property sets up right for what we're asking. You know, the city does need diverse housing types, particularly affordable housing types, and this would provide it. I think that currently, while the B3 would not be necessarily a bad use on Irvin Road, I think that corridor and the intersection, an R3, a residential, is a more appropriate zone for that right there on Irvin Road. There's already an entranceway there that's been approved by the Transportation Cabinet, and then you've got your connectivity with the stub of Atwood Drive to the north there that is stubs into this property. Then you can go up to Great House and cross back over to the bypass where Great House and Duckhorn Drive are currently getting a new stoplight. That actually, I think, was hung today with the flashing lights.
Yeah.
So again, I think your mobile home use there in the back, while that may have been zoned that way years ago to connect to the existing mobile home, we probably could get a more higher and better use with an R2 that we're asking for there, and then the R3 in the front. I think we could get some more density with housing that still meets what's needed and is complementary to the area. So I think with that, I do believe it's in agreement with the comprehensive plan because of the housing needs that we've identified in our comprehensive plan. I think that the existing zoning is likely inappropriate because it's not the highest and best use. And so either one, but certainly both of those grounds would justify the zone change. And I think that this really tucks in well to an area that has basically become along the major corridor there, business, then tucked into slightly dense housing. That's kind of the way that corridor has developed. And I would just lastly say, I believe this property's been annexed into the city since the 90s, I understand. And at this point, this seems to be the type of development that the area is seeing and would work. So with that, we say it's in agreement with the comprehensive plan, and we'd appreciate your approval. And I'd answer any questions you have and welcome a dialogue.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, of course. That's a lot of apartments, all congested in that area. We just approved, another huge section. I wouldn't mind keeping that business, not necessarily trailer park, but just a business zone behind Chrysler or whatever. And, then they can have the housing above. But, it's a major road, and it's just apartment after apartment. That's a lot of traffic.
Well,
A lot of cars.
I put it to you this way. One, there are traffic improvements in the areas that are ongoing now that are intended to accommodate more development in the area. 52 handles a lot of traffic. Now, that's a busy intersection, but that's why it's so important that all of this development would reconnect back through Atwood and go up to the light at Great House. And I'll tell you that the city does in fact need a lot of apartments. I know we think we get a lot of apartments, but when you look at the demographics in the comprehensive plan that show the median age and median income of the folks in Richmond, those are folks that would either need to or choose to rent, and there's just a large demand there. I think the market is showing that. Everything that's built is full. And since the 90s, when this was put into the comprehensive plan, it's the last of any of the Holcomb property that's left to be developed. So I guess the way it's zoned is not working in the market. So I recognize what you're saying, and I think those are all concerns that when we come back with a development plan and we actually look at this, we got to make sure it works right. But I still would tell you, I do believe that the area can handle the apartments. And we'll certainly, we'll want to make sure that that number of units and the way they're aligned is complementary of the area and not hurting.
Well, when you come back with the development plan now, you're going to have more than one way out of there. You're going to you can't just put it down to 52 in Urban Road.
Oh, no, sir. They're all of it, the whole we've got this in two different zones.
I want to make sure that you've got something coming out on Robert Martin.
Well, that's right. So you would go back up through Atwood, which is already stubbed into the property. So Atwood was intended to be for development to follow into this property. So Atwood stubs in there, and you can go up to Great House where there's a new light there at the Robert Martin bypass where Great House crosses over to Duckhorn.
Kevin, you got anything?
I've always got something.
First time.
Preston, what I'm hearing for the first time here, and of course, we have no development plan, we have anything like that, but what I'm hearing you talk about is naturally we're going to have at least one entrance at a minimum.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to travel through here, and when you say connect to Atwood, you're actually traveling back and hooking to Atwood right there. Is that correct? It's just what I'm hearing.
Well, obviously, we've got to bring the development plan back and the preliminary plat, and you've got to be satisfied with that, and they've got to be satisfied. I'm just saying that is a potential option. Because Atwood was stubbed into this property, I believe that was an intention to continue it into a development on this property. So while, again, this is the zone, this is just the zone change, and I don't want to overcommit my client or you or anybody. When I'm looking at this, from a more of an academic perspective, and having been in front of you all a lot and talked about a lot of different roads in this town, to me that looks like a logical way of providing more connectivity into this property. But there are other, there's a cul-de-sac along the way that could be negotiated. I mean, there's a couple different things, but I know when Atwood was stubbed in the property, that would have been the thought process, was to any development on that property to connect back through Atwood. And now with the light at Great House, Duckhorn, Robert Martin bypass, it makes even more sense that would be a way to try to take traffic.
To address your question, Dr. Miller, about one way in, one way out,
Because that road is
And-
busy.
And again, this is not a development plan, it's not a preliminary, this is a zone change. But just to address your comment, we have potentially a connection here, a connection there, and you just approved a development plan, a preliminary plat here with a stub out, right there. That's where that will occur, with the prior, item on the agenda. So there is at least one, if not three, potential connections. But until we see a development plan,
That's right. And again, with that topography, that'll be our biggest challenge of what what we're able to bring back. But you do see good access points and topography along that left side of all that backs up to all that business corridor section. That's where it makes the most sense, like I said, to get back up into Atwood and then down to Irvin Road.
Plus, it'd be nice if Atwood was ever completed.
Well, that's right.
That's the most screwed up road in Richmond. Why in the world do you go
Comes in
here and you
segments.
stop and you go for, a quarter mile and you start it again?
Loop backwards into the Save-A-Lot parking lot.
Yeah,
and,
exactly. That is the biggest mess, and it would really help with some flow if you could get rid of some of that
Well,
mess.
and if down the road, that, obviously, that wouldn't be something that this particular development would do, but it might trigger down the road. You're right, if we could ever connect all of that, then you could go all the way to 4 Mile
Exactly.
with connections all the way up and
You'd
down.
have multiple lights.
Yeah.
Well, see, they were going to come out on that one where the light is, there, right across, right by Save-A-Lot. They were going to try to buy that property there and exit out, but they couldn't buy that because the people were in Florida or something like that, and they wouldn't sell it. But that was the way of the plans, but then the people at Save-A-Lot had to make an exit around there, so everybody goes through the parking lot.
Oh, yeah, it's
It's a mess.
a disaster.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here that's,
Yeah, excuse me.
that has anything else to say about it? You can come up here and just give your name, please, at the mic.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Skaggs, a new new to your community, and we're residents of Wyatt Court, which is the very lower part of Hidden Hills. It's a brand-new street, 2 houses as of now, and we received a letter from Mr. Stone about the connection to the property, and we'd just like some clarification, please. When he was talking about the topography there where the creek runs through, I know you can't promise me this, but our selling point in buying in Madison County on that area was that tree-lined creek and privacy. Do you see at this point that the topography looks like that it might be so difficult that you would not doze and disturb my creek, that I can still sit there on the bank? Don't worry, I could hold you to it.
I'll take the microphone and answer that, unless you have
Be
something
happy
else you
to.
want. Or if somebody else wants to.
No, I'm just gonna ask my neighbors. I'll take the top.
Say. We live next door, so that's our creek.
He made a comment that there's so much height difference from the creek up to that field that probably the tree line would be above. You would not come down all the way to the creek, it's clearing out all the tree lines.
I can address that. Again, I don't want, it's this time for public hearing, I don't want to do it.
Your input would be.
Yeah. So, and Mr. Grant is here and can speak to this also, but, I mean, you can see the way that those topographical lines in that creek run. There, while I can't say exactly what it's going to look like, you can imagine that there is a lot of that right along the line between this property and Hidden Hills that cannot be developed. And so if that's the case, there would be no reason to take out any natural buffer that we could keep if it's not to be developed anyway. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities for both this potential development and that neighborhood to be really great neighbors down the road in the use of what that land might be. Now, again, until we come back to you with a development plan, I can't tell you exactly everything that will keep, but in generalities to their questions, I think that you can see when you've got, right at that creek, that where it connects kind of across and comes back in, you're doing about a 20-foot, 30-foot climb right there with a natural piece of water. It's not practical to develop that. So, I mean, again, I don't want to overcommit Mr. Grant, but I think for the best that I could say at this stage, that there's going to be ample opportunity to complement that neighborhood and be respectful of those neighbors and what they'd like to see. Certainly with the caveat that change is change. Thank you.
Anything else? I get a motion.
You want to?
I'm sorry. I'd like to say something here. On this property, I would like for the commission to know that I really don't know what can happen on this property. I mean, it's stuck me as bad as the very dog. And the first thing we gotta do before we do anything is go out there and move the grade, of course. And then we gotta clean it up. And then at some point in time, I've got to move some earth to see if I can tie in to Apple. And I would probably be doing some of that before I come back in front of y'all, just to make sure I can meet grades before I come back to you.
Yeah.
To make sure I meet all your grades. So I would put an NOI and probably be moving some there to see if I can meet those grades and give you a development. But I wouldn't want y'all to think he's out there moving dirt, let's do what he wants to do, and here we go. But the land is so rough, it's gonna take some mighty thinking and a lot of dirt moving, might have to move 2 or 3 times to get it where we need it. But I mean, it's just a massive undertaking just to try to think that up, get that way.
And I think you all
Alan, I'm glad you mentioned that because I did get a request about those grave sites that were in there. I think some of those people they had something else to go to, but they were concerned about those grave sites there. And I think, Kevin, a fence or something, you put a temporary fence something around it.
Yeah, I've been contact people to get those moved.
I asked Tyler, I spoke with Sharon Graves today, and Tyler reached out to one of the family members, and she was concerned about how they would be preserved or if they could be moved. What I'm hearing now is Mr. Grant is already ahead of the game to move them. Sharon Graves and her associates would like to be involved. They have asked that, and one of the family members of the graveside as well. And we reached out, Tyler sent a detailed email to the family member, letting her know that we do understand that the graveside is there and that City of Richmond is not going to proceed without considering anything that we need to there, so.
How many sites are we talking about?
Yeah.
5?
And my understanding from the funeral home is that there will be nothing there but dark dirt.
I understand.
It's pretty significant.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That gentleman actually signed the Declaration of Independence.
What was his name?
He signed a
I
declaration.
cannot recall his name, but it's been about 2 years since I've dealt with it. I had to go up there and find this thing in the midst of a jungle, but found it, and Sharon, that's when I first met Miss Sharon Graves. But it's fully documented. It's very special to know that we have someone right here in the city of Richmond that signed that declaration. It's pretty
Probably be a
amazing.
plaque out there someplace.
Well, they're gonna take, aren't they?
Well, I mean,
plaque
still,
out there?
wherever you put it, that gravesite.
It's on the fence line behind Casa.
Very close, about 250 feet most, directly behind Casa.
I hope all that discussion comforted you that that's all been well taken into account.
Yeah. Okay, we got a motion on that. Can I get a second?
Second.
And just so I'm clear, that was motion to approve. Okay,
And approval of findings of fact.
sure. Francis. Okay, Commissioner Shu,
Yes.
Commissioner Francis,
Yes.
Commissioner Short,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Miles,
Yes.
Commissioner Estelle.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a great night. Good to see you.
Got other business?
That's you.
Kevin?
If you have anything.
Just in short, it is to my understanding that, for your all's benefit, if you don't know already, that the planning and zoning director position, those will be done for interviews July 2nd and 3rd.
Yeah.
And happy to announce that earlier this week, we have absorbed a new face to the planning and zoning group. Her name is Jerry Marie Wilson. She's worked in the codes department for 20 years. We're still jockeying positions and understanding what we're doing and as we separate the departments and things. But Jerry has now officially been made part of our planning and zoning group. So we have a new face and some more help. Other than that, I'll leave it there.
Well, I want to thank you for stepping up and taking over such a good role, and I've been very impressed, the knowledge and whatnot, and presentation, and I just want to let you know that.
Don't say too much about it, man. You got any director's report? Adjournment?
Make a motion.
Yes.
Aye.
What do you want? Oh, that's fine. You can. Yeah, they're hard. Yeah, because that's it. Which one? The Ham Club, the whole thing?